If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Don't believe me? Here's 5 reasons why. First, it's free. Second, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. 3, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so many more. 4, you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And 5, it's everything you need to make a podcast, all in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Counter Narrative Podcast, a show designed to change the way we talk and think about education. By sharing stories of successes and triumphs, we aim to challenge the dominant narrative that often negatively portrays our disenfranchised populations. I'm your host, Charles Williams, an educator for 15 years, a current school principal in Chicago, and an educational consultant. Let's get started. This episode is a Pause to Ponder segment. These bi-weekly sessions will allow me to share with you my personal thoughts and reflections on a wide spectrum of topics as they relate to education. It is my hope that you will be able to take something from these segments and apply it in a meaningful way as you continue to do amazing work. Remember, while we all have different roles, we all have a single job: educating our students. Schools across the country are in various states of returning for the school year. I have some colleagues who are back in their buildings with their students while others are providing instruction remotely. Some are setting up their classrooms while others are prepping their instructional spaces at home. So with this in mind, I wanted to share with you something that I share with my staff at the beginning of the year: my principal permissions. Now, before I dive into this, allow me to preface the conversation with my thoughts behind these permissions. By no means do I believe that my employees should seek my permission for everything that they do. I do not envision myself as some authoritative leader issuing yeas and nays as staff come to me with requests. That is by no means the case. Instead, I wanted them to be aware that there are great expectations that I have for them, and if they are paralyzed by the fear of receiving permission, then we'll never get anywhere. So here are my 5 principal permissions. Permission to grow and learn. I once heard a quote that said, "He who dares to teach must never cease to learn," and I absolutely agree with this sentiment. However, I do not believe in forcing teachers to learn nor to grow. I was one of those educators who loved attending conferences. Not only did I get to visit somewhere new, but I also had the chance to be immersed in learning opportunities for multiple days. I would rapidly consume as much as I could and bring that newfound knowledge back with me to enhance my instructional practices. In fact, I still do that. There exist, however, educators who do not share that same passion for professional development. They go simply because they are supposed to go. They go because it is what's expected of them. I quickly adopted the philosophy that I would not waste my school's time and resources mandating that staff attend conferences and workshops outside of the building. Instead, I sought out those who expressed that desire to grow, those who demonstrate an eagerness to learn. What I found was that most staff did want to improve their teaching practices, but they each needed different things and had various learning preferences. Some loved the idea of conferences while others preferred online workshops. Some preferred reading text while others preferred participating in PLCs. Whatever the format, my staff realized that I wanted them to continue their professional growth and would support those endeavors. I would just not dictate how or when. Permission to take risks. With new learning comes innovation. Well, it should anyway. And I wanted my staff to know that the permission to learn and grow was intentional because we needed to be innovative if we expected to continue experiencing success in an ever-changing world. To this end, I made it clear that I would ask my staff 3 questions, well, usually more, but these were the foundational ones, if they brought a new idea to me. Could it work? Will it hurt or negatively impact our students? Then why not? When I first arrived at my school, our students were at the 18th percentile in math achievement. It was deplorable. We tried a few approaches with little improvement. Then one of my staff members, Mr. Wester, approached me with the idea of piloting a new math program called Engage New York. He liked how it dove into concepts and required students to actually think and talk about math instead of simply solving problems. After 1 year of implementation, his students' scores skyrocketed, surpassing all others in the building. The next year, we expanded the program so that his 3rd grade students could continue it in 4th grade and that his incoming students would be exposed to it. Again, our scores were impressive. Needless to say, we grew the program and our students were at the 48th percentile as of last year. We had no idea how this would have turned out, but we knew that there was a possibility of success, and so we ran with it. I'm sure glad he was willing to take that risk. Permission to fail. One of the biggest barriers to being innovative is the understanding that with growth comes failure. It is an inherent part of the process. It is something that is commonplace in most educational conversations as we discuss the need for staff and students to adopt a growth mindset. We all accept that failure will happen. But do administrators always demonstrate that through their actions? Do we always walk our talk? You see, it is one thing to tell your staff that they have permission to fail, and it is one to show them that same level of support and dedication when it actually happens. See, I try to do both. I recall a time when a teacher wanted students to create skits showcasing a social science concept. If I remember correctly, students were exploring symbiotic relationships in nature. The task was to replicate these various relationships in terms of human interactions, so that students could better understand the differences between them. She was very excited and invited me to come into the classroom to watch the skits. Well, it went horribly wrong. The students had fun presenting their skits to the classroom, but it was very clear that they had little understanding of the concepts. This became even more evident during the follow-up questions when students struggled with providing the rationales for their creative choices. I could tell that the teacher was becoming both frustrated with the students and embarrassed with me watching the whole thing unfold. Afterwards, I commended her on trying a new approach, but also explored how she developed the lesson. We identified some needed areas of improvement, and, after reteaching the lesson, she invited me back to see the revamped performances. Let me tell you, they were so much better. Permission to love. This is possibly the most controversial of all my permissions. We've been conditioned to become extremely careful about how we express love to our students that many educators have simply opted not to altogether. Why would they risk their jobs, their families, and their credibility because of an honest mistake or misconception? The problem with this line of thinking, however, is that many of our students rely on us to provide them with so many aspects of care that they may not be receiving elsewhere. My good friend Hamish Brewer explains that he begins and ends his day with telling all of his students that he loves them because he knows it may be the only time that they hear it. Can you imagine? Imagine not hearing that you're cared for. Imagine not feeling cared for. I've made it clear to my school that we believe in the concept of Maslow over Bloom. We know that our students cannot function without basic necessities like food, water, and shelter, so we ensure that they have those items. But we also know that students need to feel included, that they need to feel loved. You see, one winter I had a young man who arrived on the day of our annual holiday program. All students were dressed up, and so was he. The only problem was that his clothes clearly no longer fit him. They were also stained and extremely wrinkled. He was embarrassed when he saw all of his peers and began to come up with excuses as to why he could not go on stage. During my lunch, I ran over to the store and picked him up a new outfit, pulled him out of class, and let him change. You should have seen the confidence he exuded when he returned to class and when he was on stage. His mother, initially surprised at his clothes, thanked me tearfully, explaining that she was not able to get him new clothes and appreciated the kind gesture. To this day, I still have his card appreciating my efforts to him sitting on my bookshelf as a testament to how far a small gesture of love can go. Permission to have fun. Lastly, I want my staff and students to have fun. There's nothing that says learning needs to be boring or monotonous. In fact, I tell my staff all the time that if I fall asleep during your observation, and trust me, it's happened, we need to have a serious conversation. I make it clear that I do not expect silence as I walk through the hallways, nor do I expect to see students sitting neatly in rows as they complete their assignments. To me, organized chaos is a true reflection of learning. I also know that we need to have breaks. Does anybody not think it odd that we're expected to be in school for 7 hours, yet can knock out remote learning in 3 to 4? It is perfectly acceptable and research-backed that we take breaks from learning. One of my favorite things is our Friday dance parties. I adapted this from Mr. D and his lunchtime DJs, and I can remember the first time I did it. Students were sitting in their seats in the cafeteria as I rolled out our large speakers. They all stopped and looked at me, wondering what their crazy principal was up to now. Calmly, I hooked everything up and then turned on some tunes. And they didn't know what to do until a few brave souls ventured out onto the dance floor, and that was all it took. I also live for our spirit weeks, and I encourage my staff to do the same. Remember that my wife, who loves Halloween, and I have 5 daughters, so there's no shortage of fun dress-up stuff all around my house. You should have seen the looks on my staff and my students' faces when I arrived to school with a hot pink wig for Crazy Hair Day, or wearing a full corduroy suit for Throwback Thursday. My staff and students, and even their families, have come to expect me to go big on these fun days, and they too have begun to step up their games. In turn, our school culture has improved drastically because we now have a place where people actually want to be. To be honest, I wasn't sure how my permissions were going to be received when I first started sharing them. I was afraid that I would be perceived as that egomaniac, but instead, my teachers know where I stand and what I expect from them. They know that they all have permission to be their most amazing selves. Until next time. I want to thank you for listening to the Counter Narrative Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, please be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow the show on Twitter at the CN Podcast and the host at _CW Consulting. Take care.